once again to the Love Your Life workshop. And something I think about every day now, because I get up and do this every Sunday. I think, what does it mean to love my life and not fall into ways of thinking like we were talking about, fall into ways of thinking which were become negative, become ungrateful, and I think that even even to be in situations where, I say, what is joy? And, we kind of laugh and say, what is that? Yeah, we are making strides. We're stepping forward, and it has to do with loving this life that has been given to us. But anyway, so, all the negativity about police, and overreactions of police, But I heard about two police who were very restrained. Anyway, so these two police call, they get on their radio or whatever for the home base, and they say, hey, we're over at this, they gave the address, and they said, what we found is a woman shot and killed her husband because he walked on the kitchen floor she had just mopped clean. And they said, well, did you arrest her? And they said, the floor's not dry.
That was funny.
I thought it was funny.
I liked it.
Well, I could have said, I went to Budapest and I didn't find the food very filling, so I left hungry. I can keep going.
Somebody stop him.
I know, would you just laugh, for goodness sake?
They get worse.
Tough crowd, tough crowd.
Well, you find that one like Linda that's laughing. All right, what I've been thinking about this week and wanted to share for a few minutes is the idea of practice doing a little bit better. And I kind of think it goes along with what we've been talking about. But sometimes it's like New Year's resolutions. Why don't they work? Because on January we make these big plans. I'm going to stop doing this. I'm going to start this big thing, that I've never done before. Instead of just making little changes, And I really think that to look at this person that we most want to be, or to live with more joy, to live with more gratitude and peace and these things, that we look at these little changes. And Glenn, you were saying sometimes we have these new perspectives and we go right back. But maybe what's happening is we're making little changes, and that if we were to look back on ourselves 5 years ago, 10 or more, we might, if we were able to step back and be objective, we might see this progress and this growth and this change. But it's to be more focused on these little changes. And I think sometimes in my experience, I don't know if this is true of all of us, but it seems like a lot of times for those of us who have been Christians and part of a church, and that as much as we want to look at God as being full of grace and love, and the Bible's about love, we still tend to sometimes focus on the Bible as rules and to see it that way. And when we do, I think that we tend to look at things as, oh, I've got to make this big change in my life. I've got to fix this. I've got to fix this. And it ends up just maybe making us feel more guilt, more weight. And I call it by living really by perspiration. It makes us sweat over, I got to, what we read today. Oh, I've got to learn to rejoice. I've got to learn to, Paul says rejoice. I can't worry. And then when I'm worrying, oh, I haven't done it, When I deal with the realities of life, and I feel bad. But I'm not sure that was Paul's point. I'm not sure his point was, okay, these women have been doing it wrong, just do this, get it right. What was it we read last week? He said, think about the way I've been living. And if we don't agree, don't worry, God will show it to you. In other words, it doesn't have to all be done now, but to move in this direction, make things a little better. Think about how we might do something a little better, instead of just saying, oh, I can't get it right. And so I think what Paul is trying to do, I think what God is out to do with us is to give us inspiration, not perspiration. I don't think God is trying to make us sweat over what does he want for us. I think about what does God really want for us except good for us. And to inspire. And I think when the way we look at scriptures, sometimes we look at it as the inspired word of God. So we pour over every word as if every word is something that we've got to live by and get right. And yet, maybe it was written to inspire us. And so I see I see this paradox in my relationship with God, that he loves me just as I am, but he inspires me to change. And those two things seem like they don't work together, but they do, and they're important. And so when I think about making these little changes, it's not because I'm not loved. What a great thing is to realize that we are okay and loved just as we are. Don't we need that? I think I need that. And yet, to be inspired to change. We all know that when we feel pressure to change or pressure to be perfect, we don't feel inspired. We feel tense. We feel weighted down. So I believe that God gives us both of those ingredients. He loves us just as we are, and he inspires us to become this person that we're growing into. And I think we need both of those. It's kind of interesting. If we only were just satisfied with the way we are, don't we become stagnant? If we're just saying, I'm fine the way I am, don't we really become stagnant? And yet, if we're only focused on getting better, we get frustrated. Or I see that myself. If I don't just say, hey, you know what? Yeah, there's some things this is an area I want to move in my life. I want to grow. I want to become more this way. But if it's not going fast enough, or I tend to fall back into old patterns, I can become very frustrated. So it's an interesting combination of loving at the moment the way we are, and yet also being inspired to grow or to change. So I think that's a great way to live. It's a great way to approach another person. It's a great way to approach ourselves. And so it can spill over. The way that I believe that God approaches us is how we can approach ourselves, that we love ourselves the way we are, and yet we are practicing doing a little bit better every day. And I kind of like that, and I don't think it lowers the standard, but I just kind of like thinking, oh, okay, how can I do this a little better? How can I be inspired to do this a little better? And maybe take little steps, And maybe that's what I was thinking about this all week. Maybe that's what popped into my head was like, well, maybe just a little better is just saying, hey, I'm great today. Instead of being great and finding a way to tell the world life is great. Maybe it's just a little better is just the way I say something. Maybe a little better is just doing a little bit better job at work. Or maybe a little better is just, whatever. We can find those ways to be a little better. Sorry. So I was thinking about, good and better. Like I said, a good mom lets her kids lick the beaters, when she makes a cake. A better mom turns the mixer off first. Might be the difference. But so I think that it involves beginning with grace, every day beginning with grace, and it's become so important to me. I remember as a kid being in church, and we would spend maybe a whole summer discussing grace, and we learned to define it. We learned all kinds of Bible verses about it. We learned to define it, but it's another thing to experience it and to live in it. That's what it's for, is to live with grace. And as we take communion today, and we and it's about Jesus, and it's about the cross and all that. It's all about grace. It's all about God's grace. And so as I think about making these little changes in my life, in my day, to reflect either my true heart or what I want my true heart to be, I also have to begin with grace and say, hey, you know what? I'm human. I'm imperfect. The people I love are imperfect. The people I work with are imperfect. The people all around, we're all imperfect people. So let's begin with grace, and just to allow that. And then at the same time, okay, but what am I trying to do? Inspire. To be inspired and to inspire. And so to make little changes. I think in a way, you could go back and look at a lot of things Jesus said. Like the Sermon on the Mount, when he would say, I know you've heard it said this way, I say this. Don't just go 1 mile, go 2 miles. Go do a little better. Let it really reflect who you are. Don't just get into a routine that's okay. Go a little bit beyond okay. To me it's exciting. Go a little bit beyond okay. You've heard it said love. I say love your enemies. Take it a little bit farther. Love your enemies. And that might sound like a huge thing, but I think he's just saying take this another step. Go beyond what's okay. So you go back and maybe read the Sermon on the Mount, read the things Jesus said. Now there are times when he called for just, an abrupt about face. There are times in our lives when we just need to turn 180 degrees and go another direction. There are those times. But I think as he's talking to people who are following him, people who are striving to be a reflection of joy, that he says, just find little changes that you can make. Might be an extension of the direction we're already going. You know what I mean? You might already be going a direction, and you just go a little farther. Or it could be going a totally different direction than what we're doing. It may be starting a new habit of how we talk or how we act or things that we do. Or it might be a matter of being inspired by someone else and being aware and seeing how somebody else lives and being inspired and then putting that into our own lives. But just this idea of moving and changing slowly. There's a verse in Corinthians where Paul says that we are being changed by God by degrees. And one version says something like by degrees of glory, from one degree of glory to another. That we're being changed by degrees. And I think that's interesting. That if God is Paul says, work out your salvation, is God at work in you. So it's that combination like we were talking about earlier. We do our part, but he's also working in maybe a mysterious way in us, but it's by degrees. Isn't that interesting? Why wouldn't he just go, boom, there you are, this wonderful person. And so I look at the stories of the Bible, and they are all those kinds of stories. Even creation, no matter how you look at creation, whether you look at it as very literal or very figurative, allegorical story, it's a story of degrees. Why isn't it on day one he said, boom, there it all is? Couldn't he have done that? Couldn't that be the story? But it's like, stars and, separating the water from the land, and then vegetation, and then animal, it's just by degrees. And then when you begin to look at the stories and get it, and the thing I love so much is the stories of people, like Abraham. We get this long story of we meet Abraham, maybe a young man, maybe already, an older man, but then we follow him until he's a very old man. And we follow him changing by degrees, He's this younger guy, and he's told, look, your descendants are going to be like the sands of the seashore, like the stars of the sky, and all this happened. And then we watch Abraham go, and then he lies about his wife, and then he's always doing these things, trying to work things out on his own, never being Mr. Perfect, And then we see him like over 100 years old, and kind of passing this test of faith. He grew by degrees. Moses grew by degrees. We follow Moses his whole life, from birth to 120. And we see all the stuff that he goes through. And we see this patience of life and this slow growth of life. And yet he became this man that was called, like Abraham and David and Moses, friends of God, But it wasn't always that way. It's by degrees. And as much as I like things that happen now and happen fast, and I recognize that we're people who grow by degrees. And so I look at it, if that's God's way, why not make it my way? Why not look for little things to do, little changes, the little things that make so much an impression. And don't we do that? I mean, we like little things that happen to us. We recognize little things sometimes. Sometimes the smallest little thing that somebody does for us means so much. It doesn't have to be a big thing, And the last thing is that, once again, what Paul says is God changes us from one degree of glory to another. And I don't know what you think of when you think of glory, but I think of something generally that I don't experience all the time. I don't look at my life as glorious, probably not enough. And yet, that's what Paul says, that we really, that a human life is glorious. And I love that story in John 9 where he's a blind beggar, and they're like, what, who sinned, this guy or his parents? Why was he born blind? And Jesus said, that's not it. It's so that the work of God can be done, seen in his life. And they probably would never dreamed. They looked at this person in such a way that there was no way you ever see God's hand in this person. He's a blind beggar. And I think about sometimes with the way we see people, the way we see life. And Jesus says, maybe in a way, Jesus say, here's a slightly different way to look at a human being than what you've looked at. Here's a different perspective on how you look. And in that moment, they just got, he didn't make a big lecture about it as far as, he just said, well, that's not the right way to look. God's work can be seen in this person. And it's the degree of glory. You begin to see the gloriousness of a person. Jesus said, when you feed somebody who's hungry, you feed me. When you give somebody clothes who doesn't have clothes, you fed me. When you visit someone in prison, you visited me. Perspective in seeing the glory of a human being, of a human life. And so I think, what a great perspective is to go out and know that our life is seen as glorious, and that we're changing in these degrees of glory that we don't even notice sometimes. And so if God works by degrees, then maybe I should be happy to work by degrees and by making little changes. Not big changes that produce perspiration, but to find inspiration in my life. So anyway, those are the things I was thinking about, and I hope it's helpful. All right. Let's pray again. Father, I'm grateful for this day and for this group here, and pray for each one and all the things going on in our lives. And we do think about Barb, and we're so thankful for her, and just what an incredible love that she has for so many people, and how she's taken so many people into her care, and how giving she is. And so we do pray for good results for her, for this hearing. And Lord, I just pray your blessings on everybody that's here. In Jesus' name, amen. It's a hot one. Say it's a hot one.